Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. How's it going? Hope you're having a great day. Your language learning is going from strength to strength. I've been really enjoying my Japanese recently, in spite of the episode that that I mentioned in the last episode. Episode 258 is all about jealousy. Sometimes these things could be a good wake-up call, I guess. I feel much more kind of zen now with my own learning. But what's important is that I have my goals, I have my plan, and I'm trying my hardest and trying my best within the plan that I've got. You know, maybe I'll talk about that in a future episode. Might be interesting for you guys to hear, or not. Who knows? Anyway, all right then. So today's question comes over email, and it comes from Ian. Now, Ian says, "Hi Ollie, I've just started using the Flashcards Deluxe app since buying your Make Word Stick guide, and I've found it to be immensely useful for my Spanish learning. My question is, do you have any recommendations for how best to organise my decks? I'm currently just splitting them into months, so Spanish March 2018, Spanish April, etc. Do you use a similar system, or do you find splitting them into topics is better, like food and wine, work and travel, things like that? Keep up the good work, Ian." All right, so I just read out the whole thing from from beginning to end. Ian, thanks very much for the question, and it's a good one. All right, then, organising flashcard decks. Right, so for those of you who don't know, Make Word Stick, many of you guys have a copy of this. I know it's a guide I've written, which basically shows you how I use flashcards. I know many of you guys don't like flashcards, but many people do. It's a kind of love it or hate it thing. But flashcards, love them or hate them, if you use them in the right way, which is what I talk about in the guide, can be immensely powerful. But there's a fine line between using them the right way and then totally wasting your time. So if that's something you're interested in finding out more about, please go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/makewordsstick, all one word, and that will show you more about the guide. So let's talk about these decks then. So I think before I can answer that question, Ian, we've got to kind of look at what the organisation of decks is trying to achieve. Now, with flashcards, assuming that you are doing it all the right way, and that you are assuming also that you're using them pretty regularly, which is to say on a daily basis, which is what you should be doing, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day, then there's one thing above all that will stop you from succeeding, and that is getting overwhelmed with the number of flashcards, falling behind, and getting out of sync, if you like. The great thing about an app like Flashcards Deluxe, there are many more. I like Flashcards Deluxe because it's just simple, easy to use, and it works. When you use the spatial repetition system, what that does is it will automatically bring back cards at later dates, depending on how well you know that particular card, right? But the trouble is, if you don't review it often enough, you can't keep the algorithm going. So let's say that you're learning a word, and the app decides to bring that word back in 5 minutes, and then in 1 hour, and then in 12 hours, then in 3 days, and then in 1 month, and it will keep doing that until you know it, right? Well, that only works providing you're actually on the app and using the app, so that the app can bring that back, that word back to you. If you've got like 1,000 cards in the deck, and you don't have time to go through all of them, then what will happen is you'll soon end up with this massive backlog of cards that you simply can't clear. Because whilst you're reviewing, the cards in front of you, there are another 1,000 waiting to be reviewed that you don't get to. And because you don't get to them, you get the idea, right? So the biggest danger of all with flashcards, with any flashcard system, is having a deck that kind of balloons out of control, because then the algorithm it can't work, right? So for that reason, and also I will say that it doesn't matter how diligent you are, sooner or later the deck will get out of control. Okay, and for that reason, it's good to break up the decks. For me, the simplest, most easy to manage system for breaking up the decks has been to do it by month, just like you said, Ian. So I have my April and May and so on, and there's no particular kind of genius logic behind this, other than it just helps to keep your decks manageable. It also helps to ensure that you're not kind of just flogging a dead horse. Let's say you've got a flashcard deck from January and you're still studying it in March or April. My guess would be that the words there that are not sticking for whatever reason are probably best just consigned to the dustbin. There's no good reason for you to be still actively studying vocabulary from months ago if it's not sticking. Either the approach you're using is wrong, or it's a word that you're just not meant to learn right now, in which case that's fine. Generally, it's good to keep moving forward, because rather than forcing things in, it's good just to continue, because then volume over time, the volume of new vocabulary allows your brain to learn stuff naturally. And it's, the stuff that we learn isn't always the stuff that we don't always control the stuff that we learn, right? Sometimes things go in for reasons that we will never know. It's just the way it is. So the best way to kind of stack the cards in your favor, as it were, is to keep pressing through, adding new vocabulary, letting your brain learn the stuff that it's kind of in a state to learn, and carrying on that way. So, I do it by month just for that reason. I don't find the need personally to organize my decks by theme. And I think the reason is because if you're following my system, then the only words and phrases that make it into your flashcards are those that you've identified as being very high value, very important, right? The one thing you should not do is just put every new word into your flashcards, because you won't be able to keep up. Flashcards for me are it's like that extra 10% on top of your study that should be based on a lot of input, a lot of language in context. But then just to kind of give it that extra push, you kind of use that flashcards for the last 10% of your study, which just helps you give that little bit of aid to make sure that you do remember that stuff. And so you pick the stuff that you think is very valuable, that you really want to be able to remember. And then that's where you devote your attention and your energies in the flashcards, right? And so for that reason, everything that is in your flashcards, the context should be very clear to you. You're not picking out words from the dictionary. You're picking out words and phrases that come from a text that you've been reading, or from a book that whatever, or a podcast, or whatever. You are already aware of the context that vocabulary comes from. And as soon as you hear that word or phrase again, as soon as you see it in your flashcards, you will immediately know where it's from, right? So the context is there. So I don't really see the need to kind of spend any more time classifying it by category or topic or anything. Because as well, the other thing we're trying to do is really streamline this process. Keep it quick. 5 minutes a day is fine for flashcards, providing that the stuff that you're working on is really valuable, because then you're going to see real benefits, because your speaking ability is improving every day, because you're actively growing the super useful vocabulary that you need to be able to talk about whatever it is that you're interested in. So I think that's how I talk about this. Keep it simple, keep it lightweight and streamlined. Don't overcomplicate it. For that reason, organizing your decks by month is a pretty good way to go. As ever, though, the best way is always the way that works for you. So if you've got a better way of doing it, Ian, then by all means do that. Just be aware that you need to keep it light, and you need to keep it. You need to keep the quality of the words and phrases that go into your flashcards very, very high. And if you're doing that, then this is what I always say to people who are like, "Oh, I don't like flashcards." If the stuff that you're putting into your flashcards is stuff that you really want to learn and remember, motivation will not be a problem, because you'll be on there committing that to memory, because you're going to be able to use it straight away in conversation. So there we go. Hope that answers your question, Ian. Thanks very much for sending it in. If you'd like to ask me a question, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask. To do that, you can also email me. People often prefer to send emailing questions rather than leave voice questions, and that's absolutely fine. You just have to bear with me as I read it out on air. And you can email me at olly@iwillteachyoualanguage.com. Dead easy. At the end of every episode, I like to leave you with a resource of some kind on the topic of the show. And I mentioned it earlier, the Make Word Stick guide that Ian was referring to. If you're looking for a way to improve your vocabulary using flashcards, then, like I said, it's my complete system, all written out and explained step by step. It's totally foolproof, totally idiot-proof. The only thing that tends to happen, actually, is that the app that I recommend, which is Flashcards Deluxe, they update it a lot, and they're very active with their support, which is a very good thing. But sometimes that means that the instructions and screenshots that I have in the guide are a little bit out of date, but it all still works. It's just the button might not be in the same place it used to. Anyway, If you can't figure that out, then flashcards might not be the right thing for you anyway. Things are always changing in this crazy world that we live in. If you'd like to pick up a copy of the guide, it's $7 US dollars, or £5 British, €6. What's that in Japanese yen? About 800 yen? I don't know. Anyway, you can find that at iwillteachyoualanguage.com/make-words-stick. Thanks for listening. Good luck with your flashcards, Ian, and see you back in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT. And if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.